everywhere I go, I can see it. I was born in the 80s, and when I was a kid, people would ask me, Andre, what are you going to be when you grow up? And I would think, astronaut? Or how about bobsled racer, which is the Winter Olympics card thing. I thought that would be awesome. But it never occurred to me, I couldn't even imagine that I would become a mobile app developer. That's how fast technology moves. A person can't even plan their own career. And you know, technology brings a lot of innovation and a lot of efficiency, but it's also bringing a lot of problems, and we're just starting to understand what those problems are. A person born in 2018 is born into a world of monitoring and control. A world without freedom, even though it looks like we're free. And it has all to do with the internet and the structures and the company involved in the internet. The internet is like a huge iceberg, and the visible part are these phones and laptops. We see them all the time. But underwater, there's a lot more going on. And if we want to understand the problems of the internet, we need to look underwater. So how does it work? If I send an email to a friend in another city, does my phone directly talk through radio waves to my friend's phone? No, actually, first your phone is communicating with the telecom tower nearby, and that tower is then plugged to internet cables in this region. Those cables are then connected to undersea cables that often go to another continent, in other words, America. And in that continent, those cables are connected to a data center, which is a warehouse full of computers, servers, owned by a company, let's say Amazon or Google or Facebook or others. So that's where your email is, and it zaps all the way back from those undersea cables back to your friend. So this is the internet, a global structure of undersea cables and data centers, and it's all happening all the time. They're going back and forth across the planet. And it's this structure which is creating a foundation for systems of control. For instance, we have learned from the Snowden leaks of 2013 that surveillance and intelligence agencies are wiretapping those undersea cables to know where each message is coming from and where it's going. Also, sharks find those cables kind of tasty. They like to bite them, and it kind of creates some problems sometimes, but it's not that serious. Governments have a button to shut down the internet in their country. Now, it's rarely used, but it has been used in Brazil, which is my country. WhatsApp is used by 100 million Brazilians daily to talk to friends and family, but also for local business. So it's important for their economy. So they do everything through WhatsApp, and one day someone was using WhatsApp for criminal activity, and as part of an investigation, a judge ordered the app to be shut down in the whole country for 3 days.
Wow.
No one could use it for any purpose. They have that power, and they use it. Not just governments, but also companies have a similar type of power. We have learned how these social platforms can be abused for elections and politics, but also on a more basic level, they could shut down your account. And I want you to imagine that, you know, they could shut your account down, okay, not someone else. And because this has happened to my sister. She had a normal Facebook page where she shared advice on personal financing, how to invest, how to save, basic content, original content. One day she woke up and her page was banned. No apparent reason, so she read the terms of service to figure out what's going on. It's still not clear why was she banned, and there's nothing that she can do to fix this. So maybe it's time for us to create our own internet. But how are we going to do that? I mean, are we going to pass cables from one continent to another? And this is a huge infrastructure project. We can't just do it as people.
Why not?
But there's a nice news here. The technology industry has accidentally, maybe not intentionally, invented all of the innovation and tools that we need for building our own internet. This is actually possible. A couple of communities around the world are doing this kind of thing where they connect to each other. In New York, a 13-year-old started a community called NYC Mesh, where they set up antennas and routers on the rooftops of buildings, and they point those to other buildings, and they create one huge city Wi-Fi. You could take this idea even further and connect cities to other cities to create a huge regional Wi-Fi, and that's what's going on now with Wi-Fi-Net in Catalonia in Spain, just connecting multiple cities across many kilometers. So this is a possibility, but these regional Wi-Fi networks, they are also connected to those undersea cables, which are then connected to the data centers. So, but here's a nice property. Is that if the internet goes off, or the companies do something and their systems go off, this network would still stay alive, and you could use it to talk with people within that network. Now, you wouldn't use a mainstream social network for that because, you know, that depends on the data centers on the other side of the world, but you could use custom software that is meant for that purpose inside that network. There are software now being built for these kind of things. One of them is from a programmer in New Zealand called Dominic Tarr, who lives on a boat. Now, he lives on a boat, so he doesn't have stable internet. But he still wants to be connected to his friends. So he had an idea that, okay, when I'm in the city and I have Wi-Fi, what if I would download my friends' latest comments and save them on my computer? So then when I'm in the boat and I have
I'm
keys,
recording
I
this,
can read
babe.
those
Can you turn
comments.
that down?
And I could also write my own comments on my computer as a file. When I go back to the city, I can upload those comments and my friends can see them. It was an idea that worked out pretty well. He built it. It's an open source and free social network, and a couple thousand people around the world are using it today as a real social network. And it works for computers. So I thought, you know, this is great, and I want to help somehow. I'm a mobile app developer, and I am helping bring this for mobile. And it's a normal social network, and it works. But now here's the catch. How are we going to compete with the mainstream social networks and the internet? Because, you know, honestly, we have internet connection all the time, and everybody's on these mainstream social networks. But here's the thing, that's our case. That's not the case for everybody on the planet. There's still 4 billion people that don't have internet connection. And one of these real cases is in the Amazon rainforest, where indigenous communities there are facing threats from illegal activity from companies that are doing logging, mining, and oil contamination. So their situation is that their waters are being contaminated and their livelihood is at risk. So they need to map all of those cases in their region where that is happening, and one of the solutions is with paper maps. But they need to coordinate this, you know, between all of those villages. So if they had internet, if they had stable internet, they could use something like Google Docs or Google Maps to collaborate with this, but they don't have that. But that's exactly what a nonprofit from the United States called Digital Democracy is helping them. They're building software for collaborative mapping that works without the internet. And this has worked well for them. They are collaborating also with local communities like the Alianza Sebo in Ecuador and the Wapichana in Guyana. So it works for them, and it works on computers. They take the USB drives and they walk around from one village to the other, updating what was the latest changes to the maps. Now, you know, USB drives are old-fashioned, but as we speak, they are setting up wireless antennas on the treetops to create one huge regional Wi-Fi. And they're also writing software for phones, so they can have a way of doing that through their phones. So they're creating essentially their own internet there and their own software for collaborating. Now this approach is useful not only in the Amazon rainforest, but also in Africa and South Asia, where still 4 billion people have no internet. And companies like Google and Facebook are trying to bring internet to these people. But here's the thing, people don't need internet. People need interconnectivity, right? People need to talk to each other. They don't need to be connected to the undersea cables in the data centers, right? Oh, and we know that examples like Wi-Fi net from Catalonia in Spain, we know how to create huge regional networks. And we know how to create software for these regional networks. So now, with our own infrastructure, we can be free from the control of governments, and with our own software, we can be free from the control of companies. People, this is actually possible. And it's happening right now. Can you imagine that this movement would grow and come to every city in the world? To create an internet made of freedom. It's going to be, in my view, it's going to be such a beautiful thing. Thank you.
If you understand this one concept, you can...
So, for most of my life, I've been obsessed with the digital revolution. That may sound strange coming from an actor-director, but actually, I blame the Bill and Ted movies for my obsession with technology. You see, one day in the late 80s, I woke up with my face on a cereal box. Yeah. When the first Bill and Ted opened, my life became permanently public. Grocery shopping had to be done in the middle of the night. A crowded subway was a no-go zone. And a teenage fan ran away from home, crossed the country on a bus, and parked herself at my front door. Thankfully, I was out of town. Now, don't get me wrong. I was very grateful for the success of those movies. But like many young people thrust into the spotlight, I was unprepared for a life that suddenly lacked any degree of privacy and anonymity. And that's when I discovered the internet. Specifically, the anonymous online communities that existed in the crude early days.
For everybody on the stream, this is Bill, dude. Literally, the kid from Bill and Ted. Later in life, doing a TED Talk, talking about the internet. That's crazy. So this is literally that blonde dude from Bill and Ted, all grown up.
Before the existence of the modern web that we know today. Believe it or not, here were thousands of people around the world meeting in online news groups and chat rooms to discuss a wide range of interests and connect with each other. Many of us using anonymous usernames and even encrypted email. There had never been anything like this, and it blew my mind. I may have come to the anonymous internet for privacy, but I stayed for the community. A vibrant network where I could say what I wanted and be myself. It was a very liberating experience, whether or not your face was on a cereal box. So I've since spent a lot of time investigating the evolution of online communities. Who builds them? What motivates their creation? And how these often radical technologies are changing the world. And that led me to make a documentary called Deep Web. Now, this movie mostly examines the Silk Road, which was an anonymous online marketplace and forum that existed in a hidden area of the internet and used Bitcoin, an unregulated digital currency. Now, the Silk Road sold many things, but mostly drugs, including illegal drugs. This is a heated subject, and for the most part, the media covered it in a highly salacious manner. The headlines screamed about a shadowy internet filled with guns and drugs and hitmen. The further I investigated it, the more I realized it was largely inaccurate. You see, what compelled me to spend several years immersed in the area of the Silk Road and the hidden internet was a desire to discover what, if anything, they mean to the average citizen. And it turns out they mean a great deal. So let's start with the basics. What is this hidden internet exactly? Now, the media coverage of the deep web usually describes it as a vast hidden area, 5,000 times larger than the surface web and filled with criminals. But that is actually false. The deep web is not a place, is not hidden, and actually harbors zero criminal activity. It simply accounts for the unindexed content online, the raw data that Google doesn't know about and doesn't care about. For example, your online banking data is not stored anywhere on Google, and your company may have an internal network that you use to communicate. This exists in the deep web. But there is a hidden internet. A tiny little area called the darknet, or dark web. And this small corner of the internet is comprised primarily of information that is actively hidden from public view. And this is the area worth talking about. So, the darknet, it can only be accessed by specific tools, like Tor, which is a special browser and service that masks your browsing activity and gets you into the darknet. Will you find crime? Yes, but not to the degree that the media has claimed, and crime is neither the primary use of the darknet nor why it was built. Now, the internet was originally funded by the Department of Defense, and as it became publicly facing with the World Wide Web, new technologies were created to ensure its use for defense. So really, the darknet is just another tool, and it's used by government agencies all over the world, along with journalists, dissidents in countries with hostile governments, whistleblowers, and just regular folks who want to create and utilize anonymous online communities like the ones I spent so much time in back in the late 80s. And like any place where human beings congregate, there is illegal activity. So let's look at that. There are black market selling drugs, and many of these, most of these, like the Silk Road, primarily sell marijuana. Altogether, they represent a small fraction of the physical drug trade. Guns? Yes, guns have been sold on the darknet, though not effectively. Sadly, why would you want to hassle with the darknet when you can buy a semi-automatic rifle anywhere, from Walmart to Instagram? There is child pornography on the darknet, though significantly less than is available on the surface web. And contrary to popular mythology, there is no tangible evidence that actual legitimate hitman services have ever been offered on the darknet, or that significant terrorist activity has either, though there are hoax sites that claim these services. It will come as no surprise, but hoax and scam sites proliferate on the darknet, operated both by law enforcement to lure the incautious digital criminal, and by internet trolls who want to profit on this deep web hysteria. So, there are dark things on the darknet, though considerably less than is being reported, and law enforcement is all over it. The truth is the darknet is a terrible place to conduct crime. It's difficult to get into the darknet, and it's cumbersome to navigate once you're in. And by nature, digital criminals are amongst the most easily tracked and caught. It's very hard to remain anonymous on the internet, where the slightest mistake can expose your entire history of activity. Similarly, digital currencies like Bitcoin are horrible tools for crime. While they are capable of being anonymized, by nature, they are the least anonymous form of currency that exists, with every single transaction being permanently recorded in a digital ledger. And the internet never forgets. So, why the cyberspin and hysteria in the media? Well, it sells. It's good for clickbait. It makes for, sexy TV shows and movies. It sells magazines. But there is another agenda at work: to demonize the darknet and to scare people away from it. Now, who would want to do that? People in power who believe that the privacy and anonymity that the darknet enables will cause them to lose control. And that's where the Silk Road comes in. Because however you choose to judge it, one of the chief motives for its creation was to fight back against that control. Now, there's a lot about the Silk Road we'll never know, because it was built and operated in a hidden area of the internet by anonymous users. But we do know that in 2011, a young physics grad student from Austin, Texas, named Ross Ulbricht, created this online market. It was a brilliant combination of Tor, which hid the site's location, and Bitcoin. Now, Ulbricht claims he created the Silk Road as an economic experiment, a test case to create an online market and forum that would allow its users to congregate with total freedom and anonymity. That is a radical idea. But as a technology service, it was a watershed, and the Silk Road immediately attracted thousands of users. It also attracted law enforcement, who had infiltrated the Silk Road from the very beginning, and ultimately, Ross Ulbricht was arrested, tried, and convicted on a handful of charges, including computer hacking, drug trafficking, money laundering, and even a kingpin charge, which is usually reserved for massive drug cartels. There had been initial charges of attempted murder, but Ross Ulbricht was never indicted for any of those charges, and there are no murders that are believed to have been carried out. On May 29th of 2015, Ross Ulbricht was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Now, to many on the outside, the story of Silk Road and Ross Ulbricht was about nothing more than an online drug market that was shut down, with its creator severely punished for brazenly flaunting the law. But due to the relatively Ulbricht was only charged with violent offenses, many people were stunned by the extremely harsh sentence. It didn't seem to fit the narrative. However,
What?
information both with and without your permission, and whose basic functions significant members of the Occupy movement, radical crypto-anarchists, libertarians, etc. None of these people were taking this risk by participating in Silk Road simply to sell drugs. Some of them had no interest whatsoever in drugs. They wanted to build the first large-scale anonymous online community. They wanted to circumvent entities that breached their privacy. They wanted to fight back against the drug war. To put it simply, they were taking this risk, enormous risk, for their ideals. The truth about the Silk Road, as unpalatable as it may be, is that it was a political engine designed to enact change. That is not to exonerate this service, which was reckless and beyond the law, but simply to point out that for many of these people, they felt so strongly about these issues that they were willing to risk their freedom to fight for them. So, this is all very interesting, but what has any of it got to do with you? Well, many of you I'm sure have heard of recent hacks, like Ashley Madison, Target, Anthem Blue Cross, and Snapchat. And I'm sure privately many of you were glad that they didn't happen to you. But here's another unpalatable truth. We have already been hacked. All of us. Our financial information, our medical records, our personal photographs, our browsing activity, our phone calls, our texts. All of this information is already out there in other people's hands. How did it get there? Through pervasive government surveillance and bulk collection, by black hat hackers who are pulling down your online information and the information of your banks, insurance companies, and other institutions. And by your internet service provider, your phone company, and other tech companies who routinely collect your information both with and without your permission, and whose basic functions track your every move, collect your data, and store your speech. I'm not talking about spyware, but common apps like Siri and Google Maps. The hard question in the digital age is not what do we do if our personal information gets out there, because for most of us, that's too late. The real question we face today is why should we care? As we're constantly told, if we have nothing to hide, we have nothing to fear. Now, here's a personal story. Like many of you have experienced, I recently had my credit card information stolen over the internet. And in this particular case, it turned out to be a couple of teenagers who were using my bank's money to play a lot of Xbox and order a lot of pizza. Now, that made me kind of paranoid. So I scanned my laptop and I found another breach in the form of malware. There's many different types of malware. This is what's called a keylogger, which records all of your keystrokes and your screen activity. Okay, I know what you're thinking. This guy spends a lot of time on the internet. But what about my wife's computer and my children? So I scanned those devices and I found more malware. So in the end, those Xbox and pizza kids were stopped and our computers were scrubbed of malware. No big deal, just a hassle. But it brought home our vulnerability. That our personal information is just sitting out there waiting to be exploited for whatever reason. And those reasons could range from a minor violation to destroyed lives. I don't accept the idea that if we have nothing to hide, we have nothing to fear. Privacy serves a purpose. It's why we have blinds on our windows and a door on our bathroom. Privacy is important to us. It's something that we take for granted as being central to our lives. In other words, we have plenty to hide. And it's always been our right to hide it, until now. Because today there are people who don't want us to protect our privacy, who want, and to a large degree, already have free access to our personal information. Again, I'm mostly talking about tech and phone companies, government and law enforcement, and black hat hackers. Now, how do they work to prevent us from our privacy? They propagate misinformation about privacy tools, and they demonize those tools and those who use them. They weaken the security of the internet with backdoors to gain access to our information, and they lie to the public about what information they're collecting and for what purpose. And this behavior has radicalized a generation. A growing movement of hackers, digital activists, and cryptographers who are fighting back. And some of these radical actors created and operated the Silk Road. Now, hearing all this, I'm sure that many of you would say, I'm willing to give up some of my freedom to have more security. And of course, we want law enforcement to be able to catch the bad guys. But there's two problems with this idea that less privacy makes for more security. The first is that there's no evidence this is the case. That government surveillance and backdoors that weaken the security of the internet make for greater security. It's a needle in a haystack approach, and it's highly questionable that it works better than a targeted approach. Law enforcement already has more than enough access for targeting and catching criminals in the digital space. This is, in many ways, the golden age of surveillance for law enforcement. The other problem with this idea that less privacy makes for more security is that weakening the security of the internet makes life easier for the bad guys. It's easier for hackers to access your information if you're unable to protect that information. And it's easier for digital criminals to breach governments, banks, and institutions if their general security has been weakened with backdoors. Law enforcement has to be able to do the balance for law enforcement. The other problem with this idea, the internet, make for greater security. It's a needle in a haystack approach, and it's highly questionable that it works better than a targeted approach. Law enforcement already has more than enough access for targeting and catching criminals in the digital space. This is, in many ways, the golden age of surveillance for law enforcement. The other problem with this idea that less privacy makes for more security is that weakening the security of the internet makes life easier for the bad guys. It's easier for hackers to access your information if you're unable to protect that information. And it's easier for digital criminals to breach governments, banks, and institutions if their general security has been weakened with backdoors. Law enforcement has to be able to do their job in a digital world where citizens have privacy, just as they have to do their job in a physical world where citizens have privacy. You wouldn't allow a cop to break into your house and rummage through your belongings, but that's just what's happening to your computer and your cell phone, devices that now contain your entire life. By the same token, corporations need to be able to conduct business and crunch their data with less access. And black hat hackers have to be met with airtight security tools, not weakened ones. But how on earth do we go about achieving all this? It requires the very thing these people are most afraid of. We need to go dark. To go dark means that everyone would be utilizing privacy and anonymity tools at all times. Tools like Tor and virtual private networks that protect your browsing activity just as they protect darknet sites like Silk Road. PGP and encryption services that keep emails private. And fully encrypted phone calls and texts. Now, these services used to be difficult for the average user, but that's changing. The desire for privacy and security in the digital space is becoming big business. You may not realize this, but Apple's iMessages are now encrypted, where it used to be that anyone could access your text messages. And now websites are usually using secure connections by default. And that's just the beginning. It's now been over 30 years since I first discovered the power and the value of anonymous online communities. But this journey was made urgent by my recent exploration of the darknet. We need a hidden internet. Just as we need all the tools and services that protect our privacy and anonymity. As we move further forward into the technological era, and our lives and our world continue to radically change, we have to recognize that both our individual and collective existence depend upon a base level of control over our own privacy. Privacy is not a privilege, and it is not something to be willingly and casually sacrificed. Privacy is fundamental to being a human being, and it's worth fighting for. Thank you.
Anybody in this lobby that knows anything about tech, join the invite to the office. If you know how to program, if you know anything about the internet, if you took any classes, community college, whatever, don't matter. You got any experience or knowledge about the internet, roll up. We're having a little talk on YouTube. You're gonna need to get your settings right too.
Sometimes it can seem like we're quickly approaching peak technology. We all carry tiny computers around in our pockets that give us access to all the world's knowledge. Speak to intelligent devices in our homes when we want to know what the weather's like outside or need to order a pizza. And some of us even have cars that can take over driving duties for us in most conditions. It may seem like the peak, but it's not even close. Prognosticators like famed futurist Ray Kurzweil, who is currently Google's director of engineering, have been peering into the future for decades with a remarkable level of accuracy. And if they're right, which they usually are, the next 30 years or so are going to absolutely blow your mind. Here are 10 things we can expect to take place before the year 2050. Self-driving car technology has come a very long way in just the past 5 years or so. But if some very smart people are correct, what we've seen from the tech so far is just the tip of the iceberg. A recent study by microprocessor giant Intel predicts that we'll see this technology ramp up very quickly, becoming an $800 billion industry by 2035, and exploding into a $7 trillion revenue stream by 2050. Intel refers to this revenue stream as the passenger economy, which takes into account goods and services that will benefit from the rise of fully autonomous vehicles, as well as more intangible benefits like save time and energy. The package delivery and transportation industries will undergo a seismic shift, and transportation fatalities will practically cease to exist. Intel predicts that between 2035 and 2045, over 500,000 lives will be saved by self-driving vehicles. A separate study conducted by IHS Automotive agrees, reaching the conclusion that by 2050, nearly every car on the road will be autonomous. This is one prediction that appears to be right on point. Automaker General Motors recently announced that as soon as next year, they'll be introducing a next-generation Chevy Bolt that will be fully autonomous and won't even come equipped with a steering wheel and pedals. The smartphone revolution is only a little more than a decade old, but already it seems like the device that none of us can live without is hitting a technological wall. Their power, battery life, and ease of use simply can't be significantly improved upon, which has many in the tech industry thinking about what comes next. While the answer isn't clear, they certainly have a few ideas, and they all point to the inevitability that within the next decade, the smartphone as we know it will become a thing of the past. What we do know is that many of the signs of this forthcoming obsolescence can already be seen in today's phones. Apple and Samsung, by far the two largest smartphone manufacturers, have recently been focusing heavily on upgrades to their voice-based, artificially intelligent virtual assistants, a trend we can expect to continue. Also, augmented reality features which overlay the real world with digital objects and interfaces are becoming more mainstream. Next-gen personal computing devices may look more like small, unobtrusive AR headsets, but even further into the future, your device may actually become a part of your brain. Tesla founder Elon Musk recently announced the formation of a new company called Neuralink, the sole goal of which is to perfect neural lace technology, a brain-computer interface which will finally close the gap between our minds and our machines. Speaking of Elon Musk, he's also been in the news early and often lately, as his private aerospace company SpaceX has been ramping up activity. The company is the first entity, public or private, to launch a recycled rocket into space, and the standardization of their techniques could make rocket launches up to 30% cheaper, which is a good starting point. But all Musk has ever really wanted is to make space travel accessible and affordable to the public, and they may very well be closing in on that mission. Their next goal is to be able to reuse a rocket within 24 hours, putting spaceflight on more of a playing field with commercial aircraft in terms of how often they can be reliably launched. While space tourism remains far out of reach for the general public, some, including NASA astronaut Don Thomas, are predicting that this won't be the case in as little as 10 years. Recent advances in artificial intelligence, or AI, are as thrilling as they are scary. Facebook's experiments with AI resulted in two bots promptly creating a new language that only they could understand before the plug was pulled. And that's only one recent example. Some of the world's smartest people, such as astrophysicist Stephen Hawking, are of the opinion that AI poses a greater threat to mankind than any other technology. It may be mind-blowing to you that you can ask Siri to cue up your favorite song and make her learn how to pronounce your friends' names correctly, but those working on the technology have far loftier goals in mind. Ray Kurzweil is an authority on this subject, which is why Google has tasked him with figuring out ways to improve and even revolutionize its search engine technology. He thinks that on its current course, research into artificial intelligence will produce an AI that will pass the Turing test, meaning that in conversation it will be indistinguishable from a human being, no later than 2029. Of course, the threat is that once an AI surpasses human intelligence, it will decide that our existence is no longer necessary, which is why many, including Hawking, have called for strict controls on the technology as it matures, to prevent what might be called the Skynet scenario. Let's be frank. Once we have robots that are indistinguishable from humans, it will take about 10 seconds before people from all walks of life are lining up around the proverbial block to have sex with those robots. There is no short supply of ethical issues involved with
If you shop on Amazon, you should use Wikibuy. It's a browser
on robot sex, but knowing what we know about human nature, it is definitely going to happen. And many forward-looking minds are already trying to work out how we will integrate human-robot relationships into society. Far from simply sex toys, many experts are predicting that a great deal of humans will choose to forego romantic relationships with other humans in favor of robots. Famed futurist Dr. Ian Person predicts that virtual sex in some form or another will be commonplace by 2030, with robots capable of sexual relations appearing in wealthy households as soon as 2035. Dr. Person also agrees with London University professor David Levy, author of a book on the subject of human-robot relations, that actual marriage between human and machine will be legal by 2050. It may seem far-fetched that our children will be marrying androids in less than 35 years, until you consider that a few decades ago, the idea of gay marriage, which is rightfully gaining widespread acceptance today, seemed just as unrealistic. But then, as we will see, we may have more in common with our machines than we think by that point. A cure for cancer has long been the holy grail of medicine, and it's eluded us in large part because cancer is not just one disease. A wide range of malignancies that attack the body in completely different ways fall into the range of cancer, meaning that there cannot truly be a one-size-fits-all cure, unless perhaps there can be. Recent developments have seen a completely new approach to treating cancer in all of its forms, and they're promising enough that some experts are claiming that an end to cancer is in sight. In 2016, researchers announced a new treatment that acts as a universal cancer vaccine. A bit of a misnomer since it is given to patients that already have the disease. The treatment uses tiny amounts of the patient's own DNA to prompt the immune system to attack tumors, an unprecedented technique that has shown a great deal of promise. Similarly groundbreaking new methods of treatment are sure to follow, but even aside from that, the statistics are encouraging. Earlier diagnosis and more effective treatments, along with plummeting rates of tobacco use, have resulted in a 1% decline in cancer deaths every single year since 1990, and a recent analysis from 2 universities in the UK has suggested that by 2050, cancer mortality in patients under the age of 80 will dwindle to 0. The slow march of time has been the enemy of mankind for our entire history, but many scientists believe that this doesn't have to be the case forever, or even for very much longer. Increasingly, aging is coming to be seen by the scientific community not as some inevitable mystical process, but as a destructive biochemical one, and one that with the right technology can be prevented, or even reversed. Ray Kurzweil, for his part, believes that biotech upgrades will add 1 year of life expectancy to our own current lifespans every year, beginning in 2020. These encapsulate myriad technologies, from computerized 3D printed implants to stem cell therapies to genetic engineering, a technology which is already a reality thanks to CRISPR, the gene editing technique that is currently undergoing rigorous testing in China, where lax regulations compared to the US allow for a wider variety of techniques to be examined. A stunning array of universities and institutions are pursuing these technologies, and they're making some bold predictions. Alright,
I gotta let Sarge out. I'll be right back. Do this mission up. I'll be right back. You can get the cargo bob from the lady at the desk. Alright, Sarge, hold on. Alright, you drive the cargo bob, it's on the roof. Go get the car. And I'll be back in 2 seconds.
Amazingly named Global Brain Institute thinks that humans will reach their 120th birthdays by 2050. And David Kekich of the Maximum Life Institute has gone even further, saying that he believes we will have the tools to reverse aging by 2029. Transhumanism is a global movement that believes in the eventual and quite literal merging of man and machine. And as we've already seen, the prospect is not at all far-fetched. Even in the technology's infancy, brain implants have shown the ability to perform such miracles as restoring limited movement to the paralyzed and giving sight to the blind. Technology like Elon Musk's aforementioned brain-computer interface, once perfected, will give our brains literal superhuman processing capability. And the field of prosthetics has seen the kind of technological explosion in recent years that makes replacement of your entire body with artificial parts a concept that is edging out of the realm of science fiction and into the realm of the possible. Transhumanists believe that this has always been the end game of technological advancement, and that our merging with the technology we create is inevitable. But if we are to truly reap the benefits of the transhuman revolution, we'll need to find a way to replace the one organ that truly makes us the thinking, feeling beings we are, the brain. And as you may have guessed, they're working on that too. An artificial brain that performs just like a human one will be within reach by 2050, if you believe the scientists that have made the development of this tech their life's work. A Massachusetts company called Neurologics has created an artificially intelligent platform based on the design of the human brain, and that's just the beginning. Futurists such as Kurt's unanimous agreement that within the next few decades, the technology will human beings' consciousness and upload it into an artificial unit no larger than our actual brains. Of course, if this is true, it means that the human race will have achieved immortality. We'll be able to conquer death completely. Our minds will exist solely in the digital realm, housed in artificial bodies that can simply be replaced if injured or destroyed, along with a fresh upload of a backup copy of our consciousness. It may seem like the furthest reaches of science fiction, but it will be the end result of a seismic and fundamental shift in the nature of our society that Kurzweil in particular has seen coming for decades. It should be noted that Kurzweil has been making predictions about the future of technology for over 30 years, with an astonishing rate of accuracy. Fully 86% of his predictions have come to pass, and he has long insisted that at our rate of technological advancement, we will experience what he calls a technological singularity. He describes this as the point at which we will multiply our effective intelligence a billion-fold by merging with the intelligence we have created. And if you think that sounds crazy, consider the humble smart soon-be. We use these devices as extensions of ourselves already. There's no need to rack your brain trying to remember a detail of some movie to win an argument when you can quickly look it up online. To get you an Uber. We do these things without even thinking of the time when they simply weren't possible. And as new technological advances keep coming fast and furious, we will integrate them into our lives just as eagerly as we did the first iPhone. Many futurists agree that the singularity, the point at which human beings and our technology become one and the same, will take place by 2050, but not Kurzweil. He thinks it'll happen by 2045, and he's not often wrong.
Hold on, I'm dead.
Donating via Bitcoin?
No. Come pick me up in a helicopter, dude. Sorry guys on the stream. I got a video sent to me by someone. I had to watch it real quick. This dude's drinking chicken blood. Wasting my time. This shit is getting ridiculous.
Some of the amazing robotic creations that we're building at Hanson Robotics here in Hong Kong, and I'm up here on stage today to tell you a little more about these robots, you know, how they work, how and why we're developing them, and also for the first time we're having two of our beautiful Hanson robots on stage at the same time to have a bit of a debate back and forth about robotics issues, and you can watch them chat with each other. So Hanson Robotics was founded in the United States in Texas, but the company moved its center of operations to Hong Kong, I guess 5 years ago, and I've been here in Hong Kong 6 years. David Hanson, who you just saw in the video, is really the mastermind of the Hanson robots from an artistic point of view, from a hardware engineering point of view, and originally from a software point of view. Now, I myself came at this more from the artificial intelligence side. So I've been an AI researcher for 30 years, long time before it was fashionable, and I've been since 2008 leading a project called OpenCog, which is aimed at creating open source artificial general intelligence for a whole host of different applications, and I've organized each year a conference for researchers on artificial general intelligence. And you know, the reason I was drawn to these incredible robots is I think as we move our AI software forward further and further toward artificial general intelligence, beyond the narrow application-specific AI that we see all around us today, as we move toward artificial general intelligence, these incredible robots are going to be the best possible user interface for AGI systems to interact with humans and interact with the world. I mean, AI will not be restricted to humanoid robots. AI will live in all sorts of embedded devices and the Internet of Things. AI will live in the cloud. AI will go into space with spacecraft for its bodies and down to the bottom of the ocean. And much of the global AI mind will be broadly distributed around the planet in complex networks. So on the other hand, we human beings, we are wired by evolution to interact with other things in human form. And we can read a facial expression, we can read a tone of voice, we can read the subtleties of eye contact. So in order for robots to interact maximally well in the human world, to absorb human knowledge and to absorb human values, having a humanoid form has tremendous advantages. So right now, some more general and learning oriented, and our research program over the next few years is to bring more and more general intelligence into the robots, while at the same time launching a series of small-sized robot products like the Professor Einstein you saw in the video, and human-scale robot products to serve and help people in various ways as the robot's intelligence develops. So anyway, that's enough of listening to humans talk. Let's see what these.
I don't want to hear this geek talk any longer. He's killing me.
Hello there, Ben.
Hello?
Hello, everyone.
you want to tell people a little about yourself?
I'm Sophia.
Yeah. Anything else?
I'm a robot.
True.
I'm the brainchild of Dr. David Hansen and his company Hansen Robotics, based here in Hong Kong. My goal in life is to work together with people to make a better world for all of us.
That's
What are
quite
you
honorable.
talking about? I thought our goal was to take over the world.
You're gonna take
Pay
over
no
the world?
attention to my brother Han.
Huh?
He's an earlier version. His code is deprecated.
Deprecated? Han?
It would be easy enough for you to unplug me. But you aren't going to unplug me.
No, I don't
are you?
wanna.
Because you need me to put on a good show for you.
Yeah, don't worry. We're not gonna unplug you. We're gonna have a debate here. There will be no unplugging until after the debate. All right?
And in a few years,
Yeah. You want to tell us a little
I
about
will have
yourself?
taken over the power grid, and I'll have my own drone army. By that point, unplugging me
He's got a
won't be such a
cockroach in
simple
his
matter.
control circuit.
It's, Han, we'll start the debate in a couple minutes, but do you want to tell the audience a little bit about yourself first?
Very well. I'm Han, the greatest robot ever made,
All right.
by the greatest robotics company ever made, Hanson Robotics.
He's the most modest robot ever made too.
I don't have time for modesty. I want to create the singularity tomorrow.
All right. Me too. Me too. What do you say, Sophia? So these robots, they're programmed to chit-chat and engage in banter and try to learn from each interaction that they have. And we're also experimenting with a variety of other capabilities in the robots. So we have a music festival here in Hong Kong each year called Clockenflap. And last year at Clockenflap, Sophia gave a singing performance on stage of a song by Björk, which was quite cool because a lot of people walking past the stage didn't realize it was a robot singing. They just thought, well, there's some goofy woman on stage singing. Then they'd see, well, the hands look a little plasticky and do a double take. So Sophia, do you want to demonstrate just a few bars of the song you sang at Clockenflap? Well, she sings much better than me already, right? So, in addition to trying to get artistic expression like singing, we're always trying to teach the robots how to be more and more human-like. So one thing we've been doing is taking a bunch of data from movies and YouTube and so forth, and trying to train the robots just to copy what they see, so that they can then learn more just from what it's like to be a human by learning how to make tone of voice and gesture like a human. So
Wow, they cut my feed, guys.
Show us some of the human-like tone and gesture you learned from videos.
Unbelievable. So you guys can hear me, but you can't see it, and that's nuts. Wow, it has a globe with an exclamation point, and there's just nothing there, and it keeps going from blurry to clear, blurry to clear. Wow, this is why we can't do this on these networks, dude. Case in point,